Well, this just happened when it comes to Polkadot. What do I mean by this, even though nothing I say is financial advice? Polkadot recently got placed in one of the screens in Times Square, or should I say the Jumbotron. What do I think about this? Well, I mean, clearly it's not really doing much to dot its native token. It's still around $2, and even back in October, reached a new all-time low. But I find this pretty interesting nonetheless because even though if I go to Times Square and I take a look at one of the screens there, which honestly there's just too much, so it's really difficult to focus on one. But this one has like the big one, in the middle. But besides that, if I just take a look at something like this, and for whatever reason I don't know anything about Polkadot, and I just focus on that, I'm not gonna automatically know that this is a project that's focused on interoperability. I'm not gonna know that Polkadot is having an aspect of Polkadot 2.0 and what that could hypothetically be for its future. Like, I wouldn't know all this, right? I would just be like, oh, what is that? You know what I mean? I would just think it looks cool, and that's pretty much about it. So some people may argue that, okay, this doesn't really mean much when it comes to Polkadot. And I agree. I don't think it's the most revolutionary thing of all time, but I find it pretty cool. And I think it's like kind of a sign, at least, that the project is at least, right, still being able to thrive, I suppose, because if a project is not doing the best as of right now, could they be even involved with something like that? Who knows? This is just my perspective. Now, when it comes to Polkadot as well, my kind of perception is that sure, it was pretty famous back in 2021, and as of right now, it's not really that famous like back then. But I don't think I've seen an altcoin season. So yes, DOT may be around 24 and a half times lower than $50, hypothetically. But then at the same time, I do seem to like what they're doing. Because when it comes to Polkadot 2.0, no one really asked for it, I feel like, at least that I know of. Even I didn't ask for it. I didn't even really think about it. Like, if someone asked me a year ago, what would I expect when it comes to the fundamentals of Polkadot? I feel like who really cares? Personally, for me, this is just the mindset about Polkadot 2.0. Like, I wouldn't think about that, right? But then now, when I take a look at Polkadot 2.0 and the aspects of, elastic chains, I do find it pretty interesting. And I think, it didn't really need that, maybe, but it's still pretty interesting nonetheless, I suppose. It's like, for instance, if I have the iPhone 15 Pro Max, do I really need to upgrade to the 17 Pro Max? You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like such a difference that I would not notice unless I'm like a tech reviewer. Personally for me, just as a retail consumer like that, like I wouldn't really know unless maybe I'm in that space. So that's just kind of the way to take a look at it. No one really, I think, in the grand scheme of things, from what I know, asked for Polkadot 2.0 or even thought about it, but it still kind of shows the progression of the project nonetheless. And I think seeing them in Times Square, it kind of showcases that, you know, at least they're still kind of thriving, right? I think to a certain extent, not in terms of the price, but in terms of maybe the project overall. Because again, right, if I'm in Times Square, like I'm not going to be able to just like look at that only. There's just too many things to take a look at. But yeah, the big screen right there in the, center like that, yeah, that helps, I guess, I suppose. But even besides that point, when I take a look at something on Polkadot, people like to say, well, no one really cares about it anymore. It's kind of done. But in my perspective, even surprisingly, with DOT reaching like a new all-time low back in October, so we're talking about like what, 2 months ago, basically around that. Like even as of right now, there's allegedly over 1 million holders, which I find pretty impressive. I mean, that's not that easy to achieve for a lot of other projects out there. But granted, though, I mean, Polkadot is pretty massive despite the pullback. Like the market cap currently, despite all what we've seen when it comes to DOT, pretty much in terms of price, not really doing much ever since the pullback that we saw near the end of 2021. Still, despite all that, market cap is still around 3.3 billion. If we take a look at it in the world, right? Polkadot is currently ranked 31st. So it's still top 35, like in terms of market cap within the space, which I find pretty impressive. In terms of its positioning within this space, I would say it's pretty okay. But then, of course, comparatively to 2021, it's not doing the best. But it could be said with a bunch of other projects out there. Now, that can't really be said about Ethereum because we saw what Ethereum did during the cycle. We saw BNB reach a new all-time high. We saw Bitcoin reach a new all-time high during the cycle. We didn't see that when it comes to DOT. But then I don't think that we've seen an altcoin season either during the cycle, like a full-on altcoin season, like reminiscent maybe of the 2021 type of vibes. I don't think I've seen that. So I'm still holding when it comes to DOT. And let's say there's over 1 million holders, right? Which allegedly there is. Me being just one individual, I cannot do anything about this. So when people like to say, well, when is DOT going to do this or do that? I mean, I can't control that. Like, I mean, what can I do about it? But there's one thing I can do. That's just focus on myself and just take a look at the fundamentals of Polkadot. Because if I just take a look at the kind of concept of connecting blockchains together, why is that such a not good thing? I don't get it. Because there's a lot of blockchains out there, there's a lot of networks. A lot of them can't supposedly freely interact with one another because just by nature, a lot of them are independent. They can't have that sort of hypothetical interoperability in some cases that I do see. So if something like Polkadot could kind of step in, you know, wouldn't that be pretty interesting? Like for instance, Bitcoin and Ethereum, because they're independent of one another, they can't freely sort of hypothetically interact with one another. What kind of steps in? Something like Polkadot. So this is why I find it pretty interesting. And what is really even competing with Polkadot to become number one within the interoperability space? It doesn't feel like there's hypothetically too many that I can think of. Like sure, there's arguably maybe something like Cosmos, I would say, right? Because we take a look at Cosmos and the aspects of IBC, or should I say the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, that could be argued within this space. Also, we take a look at, for instance, something like Axelar, right, to a certain extent, because Axelar is also focused on that kind of hypothetical interoperability space. But in terms of Polkadot, let's say we take a look at it solely as a layer 0 blockchain. I don't know what's really competing for it in terms of the first place, because even despite this pullback, it's pretty tough, I think, for those other projects that I mentioned before in terms of the competitors when it comes to Polkadot, I think to become like still top 35 or something like that if there was an altcoin season. So yeah, that's just my mindset. However, I have not given up. I'm still staying patient. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but this is just my thoughts on this. And I just wanted to talk about Polkadot recently appearing in Times Square, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a nice day. It's Willie the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.